May 15, 1941. RAF Cranwell, Lincolnshire, England. The morning fog hasn't lifted yet when Flight Lieutenant P.E.G. Gerry Sayer climbs into the cockpit of the strangest aircraft he's ever seen. No propeller, no engine mounted on the nose, just a sleek, turquoise fuselage with stubby wings and an air intake that swallows the damp morning air like a hungry mouth. Behind him, a handful of engineers stand in anxious silence. Among them is a thin, exhausted man with dark circles under his eyes. Frank Whittle, 34 years old, who has bet everything on this moment. You have to understand this is 1941 and Britain is losing. The Luftwaffe owns the skies over Europe. RAF pilots are dying in Spitfires and Hurricanes that are already obsolete compared to the newer German fighters. And here, on this remote airfield, a machine that defies every rule of aviation sits waiting to prove whether the future of flight is possible or just the fever dream of a man the Air Ministry has dismissed for nearly a decade. Whittle doesn't look like a revolutionary. He looks like someone who hasn't slept in months, because he hasn't. Since 1930, when he first proposed a jet engine as a 23-year-old RAF officer cadet. He's been fighting a war on two fronts, one against Nazi Germany, and another against his own government's indifference. His thesis, Future Developments in Aircraft Design, proposed using a gas turbine to propel aircraft at unprecedented speeds. The Air Ministry read it, filed it, and forgot about it. They called it impractical, too theoretical, a waste of resources. But Whittle couldn't forget it. By 1935, he'd scraped together private funding and founded Power Jets Limited. In a decrepit workshop in Rugby, while the Air Ministry invested millions in better propeller designs, Whittle and his tiny team worked with borrowed equipment and their own money. His first engine, the Whittle Unit U, ran successfully in 1937, the world's first functional jet engine. The Air Ministry yawned. Germany, meanwhile, was listening. Because here's what Britain didn't know in 1937. A young German engineer named Hans von Ohain was working on the exact same concept, funded by aircraft manufacturer Ernst Heinkel. Von Ohain had never heard of Whittle. Whittle had never heard of von Ohain. Two men, two countries, racing toward the same impossible idea, and only one government was paying attention. By August 1939, von Ohain's AT HS-3B engine powered the Heinkel He-178 into the air, the world's first jet-powered flight. Hitler's engineers had won the race. Britain didn't even know there was a race. Then came the war. Suddenly, the Air Ministry noticed Whittle again. In 1940, with German bombers pounding London and the RAF desperate for any advantage, they handed him a contract to build a flyable aircraft around his engine. The budget was minuscule. The timeline was impossible. The aircraft manufacturer chosen to build the airframe, Gloucester Aircraft Company, had never designed anything like this. They called the project E.28/39, a bureaucratic designation that disguised the most radical aircraft program in British history. Now it's May 1941, and Gerry Sayer is about to find out if Whittle's obsession was genius or madness. The Gloucester E.28/39 sits on the runway like a visitor from another century. Its Power Jets, W, one engine, Whittle's baby. Refined through thousands of hours of testing, is already running, emitting a high-pitched whine that sets your teeth on edge. This isn't the familiar roar of a piston engine. This is something alien, something that sounds like the future. If the future has a voice, Whittle stands beside the runway, his hands shaking. not from fear, from exhaustion and nervous energy. He's poured 11 years into this moment. 11 years of being mocked, underfunded, and ignored. 11 years of watching his engine prototypes burst into flames, melt through test beds, and bankrupt his company. His business partners have abandoned him. His health is destroyed, and if this aircraft crashes, if Sayer dies, if the engine fails, then everything Whittle has sacrificed will be for nothing. Sayer releases the brakes. The E.28/39 begins to roll. Slowly at first, then faster. The whine rises to a scream. The aircraft is light, only 300 pounds fully fueled, and the W1 engine produces 860 pounds of thrust. Not much by later standards, but enough, just barely enough, at 100 miles per hour. Sayer pulls back on the stick, and the Gloucester E.28/39 lifts into the English morning sky. No propeller to bite the air, no pistons hammering away, just smooth. Continuous power, like being pushed forward by an invisible hand. Sayer climbs to 1000 feet and holds it there, circling the airfield. Below, Whittle collapses to his knees, not in despair, but in relief. It works. God help him. It actually works. The flight lasts 17 minutes. 17 minutes that prove the jet age has arrived. But here's the tragedy. While Sayer is landing the E.28/39 to applause and champagne, Messerschmitt engineers in Germany are already building something far more deadly. June 1941. Messerschmitt AG, Augsburg, Germany. While Frank Whittle celebrates his breakthrough in England, Willy Messerschmitt stands in a Bavarian factory watching workers assemble what will become the Luftwaffe's secret weapon. The Me-262 Schwalbe Swallow looks nothing like the modest E.28/39. It's larger, heavier, and designed from the beginning to kill. Twin jet engines slung beneath swept wings, 430 mm cannons in the nose, a cockpit positioned for one purpose, hunting Allied bombers at speeds no propeller-driven fighter can match. But in June 1941, the Me-262 is still just parts on a factory floor. And that's Britain's window, if only they realize it. They don't. The problem isn't that the E.28/39 fails. The problem is that it succeeds too modestly. After Gerry Sayer's first flight, the Air Ministry pats Whittle on the back, files a positive report, and then does almost nothing. The E.28/39 makes a few more test flights. Whittle's engine gets some additional funding. RAF officials tour the program, not appreciatively, and return to what they consider real priorities, building more Spitfires, more Lancasters, more of the aircraft that are fighting today's war. Because that's what you have to understand about 1941 Britain. They're not planning for the future. They're trying to survive the present. Every factory, every engineer, every pound sterling is dedicated to producing aircraft that can fight now. The E.28/39 is fascinating. Certainly, revolutionary, even. But it's not ready for combat. It's a prototype, a proof of concept, and Britain is drowning in very real, very immediate threats. Meanwhile, across the channel, Germany is thinking differently. The Luftwaffe has learned a hard lesson during the Battle of Britain. Britain's radar, and then they're fast. Nimble fighters have turned the tide. German bombers are being shot down faster than they can be replaced. Messerschmitt's Bf 109 and FW 190 fighters are excellent. But they're reaching the limits of piston engine technology. Hermann Göring, head of the Luftwaffe, knows that Germany needs a quantum leap something that makes current Allied fighters obsolete overnight. Enter the Me-262, Messerschmitt's design team, led by Voldemar Voigt, has been working on jet fighters since 1938 before von O'Hain's. He 178 ever flew. They'd watched von O'Hain's success with interest, but Heinkel's engine was too weak, too unreliable. Messerschmitt needed something more powerful. They found it in Junkers' Jumo 004 engine, a brutish, reliable turbine that produces 1,980 pounds of thrust, nearly twice what Whittle's W1 can manage. By July 1942, the Me-262 makes its first fully jet-powered flight. It's fast, incredibly fast. During testing, it reaches 540 miles per hour, faster than any operational fighter in the world. The test pilot, Fritz Wendel, lands with a report that makes Luftwaffe commanders salivate. This aircraft makes everything else obsolete. And he's right. Back in England, Whittle's team is still struggling with basics. The Air Ministry has finally commissioned an operational jet fighter, the Gloucester Meteor, based on Whittle's engines. But development is painfully slow. British industry is stretched to breaking. Whittle's Power Jets company is chronically underfunded, forced to share its revolutionary engine designs with other manufacturers who don't fully understand the technology. The engines keep failing. Turbine blades overheat and shatter. Fuel systems clog. Each problem takes months to solve. The EWAD.28/39 itself flies throughout 1942 and into 1943, racking up valuable test data. But it's still just a test bed, unarmed, underpowered, unsuited for combat. RAF officials visit occasionally, watch it fly, and marvel at its smooth, quiet operation. Then they return to approving production runs of piston-engine Spitfires. Frank Whittle, watching this glacial progress, begins to crack under the strain. He's working 18-hour days, smoking heavily, surviving on coffee and nervous energy. His marriage is falling apart. His company is in constant financial crisis. And he can see with the terrible clarity of a prophet, no one believes that Britain is squandering its lead. Because that's the brutal irony, Britain invented the jet engine first. Britain flew the first Allied jet aircraft. Britain had a 2-year head start on operational jet technology. And Britain is about to lose the race anyway. Not because of German engineering genius, but because of British bureaucratic inertia. In Germany, things are moving faster, but not smoothly. The Me-262 has its own demons. The Jumo 004 engines are powerful, but temperamental. They have a service life of only 25 hours before they need complete replacement. They flame out without warning if the pilot advances the throttle too quickly. They're difficult to manufacture, requiring heat-resistant alloys that Germany's war economy is running short of. And Hitler himself becomes the Me-262's worst enemy. In November 1943, Hitler tours Messerschmitt's factory and sees the Me-262 for the first time. He's impressed until he learns it's designed as a fighter. "Can it carry bombs?" he asks, when told it can carry a limited bomb load. Hitler makes a catastrophic decision, convert it to a bomber. The Me-262, he declares, will be his Blitz bomber, a fast strike aircraft, to terrorize Allied ground forces during the coming invasion of France. Messerschmitt's engineers are horrified. The Me-262 is designed to intercept bombers, to climb fast and kill at high altitude. Loading it with bombs and using it for ground attack wastes everything that makes it revolutionary. But Hitler is Führer, and Hitler has decided. Production slows while engineers retrofit bomb racks and modify the aircraft for a role it was never meant to fulfill. By early 1944, Britain's Gloucester Meteor is finally approaching operational status. It first flies with production engines in March 1943, nearly 2 years after the E.28/39S maiden flight. But still months before Germany's Me-262 enters combat. The Meteor is heavier and slower than Germany's jet, but it's reliable. It works. And in July 1944, the first Meteors join RAF squadrons, hunting German V-1, flying bombs over England. But here's what makes the story tragic. If Britain had funded Whittle properly in 1935, if the Air Ministry had listened in 1937, if they'd committed resources in 1939, instead of 1940, the RAF might have had operational jet fighters by 1942. They might have stopped the Luftwaffe's bombing campaigns. They might have escorted bombers over Germany with fighters the Me-109S couldn't catch. Instead, both Britain and Germany fielded their jets too late to change the war's outcome, but just early enough to glimpse what they'd missed. September 1943. Farnborough, England. The E.28/39 sits in a hangar at the Royal Aircraft Establishment. Its turquoise paint faded from 2 years of test flying. Frank Whittle stands beside it, briefing a group of American military officials who've arrived with shocking news: the United States is building its own jet fighter, and they want Whittle's help. You see, Britain may have invented the jet engine, but they're about to lose control of their own revolution. In September 1941, just 4 months after the E.28/39S first flight, Britain made a decision that would reshape aviation history. Desperate for American support, Churchill's government shared Whittle's jet engine designs with the United States as part of the wartime technology exchange. An actual Whittle W.1X engine was crated up and shipped across the Atlantic aboard the aircraft carrier HMS Audacity. With it went blueprints, specifications, and a team of Power Jets engineers. The Americans, characteristically, moved fast. General Electric received the engine and immediately began producing American versions, the IA, later the J-31. Bell Aircraft started designing a jet fighter around it. By October 1942, the Bell XP-59 Aerocomet made its first flight in the Mojave Desert. It was America's first jet aircraft, powered by British engines, built in less than a year. The XP-59 wasn't particularly good. It was slower than the latest piston fighters and handled like a truck, but that wasn't the point. The point was that America's vast industrial machine had awakened to jet technology. And once awakened, it would rapidly surpass its teachers. Whittle watches the American officers examine his pioneer aircraft and feels a mixture of pride and bitterness. Pride, because his idea has crossed the Atlantic and taken root in the nation that will win this war. Bitterness, because Britain's own jet program remains starved, delayed, trapped in the molasses of procurement bureaucracy and wartime resource allocation. The Gloucester Meteor, Britain's operational jet fighter, is finally coming together, but painfully slowly. The aircraft itself is sound enough. It's the engines that keep causing problems. Rolls-Royce has taken over engine production from Whittle's Power Jets. And while they're competent engineers, they're learning jet technology from scratch. The early Welland engines produce only 1/700 pounds of thrust more than Whittle's original W1, but less than Germany's Jumo 004. Worse, they're unreliable. Compressor blades crack, Combustion chambers fail. Each setback costs weeks. By spring 1944, only a handful of Meteors exist. They're assigned to 616 Squadron RAF, not to fight German fighters, but to intercept V-1 flying bombs, Hitler's vengeance weapons terrorizing London. It's important work. Certainly, the V-1s are fast 400 miles per hour, too fast for most piston fighters to catch. But it's not what the Meteor was designed for. It's not air-to-air combat against the Luftwaffe's best. Meanwhile, in Germany, the Me-262 is finally entering combat and proving devastatingly effective. July 25, 1944. Over Bavaria. Luftwaffe pilot Alfred Schreiber sits in the cockpit of a Me-262 waiting for permission to engage. Below him, a formation of American B-17 flying fortresses drones toward Munich, their contrails white against the summer sky. Schreiber has flown Bf-109S for 3 years. He's a veteran, an ace with 17 kills. But nothing in his experience has prepared him for what happens when he pushes the Me-262's throttles forward. The acceleration is supernatural. One moment, he's cruising at 400 miles per hour. 3 seconds later, he's doing 540. The B-17S, which seemed so distant, rushed toward him like they're standing still. Their gunners see him coming. Tracers reach out, but Schreiber is moving too fast. He's through their formation before they can track him. His 430mm cannons hammering. One B-17 explodes. Another falls away, trailing smoke. Then Schreiber is past them, climbing, untouchable. American P-51 Mustang fighters scramble to intercept, but they might as well be standing still. The Me-262 climbs at 3,900 feet per minute. The Mustangs can barely manage 3,000. By the time they reach his altitude, Schreiber is 5 miles away, lining up another attack. This is what the Air Ministry should have feared. This is what Britain could have prevented if they'd listened to Whittle a decade earlier. The Me-262 isn't just faster than Allied fighters. It's faster in a way that renders conventional air combat tactics obsolete. Dogfighting doesn't work when your opponent can simply accelerate away. Escorts can't protect bombers when enemy fighters can slash through formations at speeds the escorts can't match. In the hands of competent pilots, the Me-262 is untouchable, and Germany has started producing them in numbers. By August 1944, Messerschmitt factories are building Me-262s at a rate of roughly 100 per month. Hitler's bomber obsession has finally been overcome by desperate Luftwaffe commanders who convinced him that jet fighters are needed to stop the Allied bombing campaign that's destroying German cities. The first jet fighter unit, Kommando Nowotny, becomes operational in September 1944. Its pilots' aces transferred from conventional fighters begin racking up kills at an alarming rate. Adolf Galland, Germany's general of fighters, flies the Me-262 personally and emerges shaking with excitement. "It's like being pushed by angels," he says. He immediately demands that every available Me-262 be assigned to fighter duties. If Germany had fielded these jets a year earlier, he tells anyone who will listen, the Luftwaffe might have stopped the Allied bombing offensive entirely. But Germany didn't field them a year earlier. And that's where the mathematics of war become interesting. Because here's the thing, by mid-1944, Germany has lost. Not yet officially, not yet finally, but the war's outcome is decided. The Allies control the skies over Germany with thousands of fighters and bombers. They've landed in France. The Red Army is crushing German forces in the east. Germany's oil refineries are being destroyed faster than they can be repaired. Its pilot training programs have collapsed. Its experienced aces are dying or burning out. The Me-262 is magnificent, but there aren't enough of them. And there aren't enough pilots trained to fly them. And there isn't enough fuel to keep them flying. And there isn't enough time to matter. Back in England, Frank Whittle watches this unfold with complex emotions. The Meteor has finally entered service, but in limited numbers and in a limited role. By the end of 1944, Meteors have shot down 13 V-1 flying bombs, useful, certainly, but not war-changing. They haven't fought Me-262s. They haven't escorted bombers over Germany. They haven't done what they could have done if Britain had started production in 1941 instead of 1944. The E.28/39, now Britain's pioneer. The aircraft that proved jets could work sits in storage now. Its test program complete. It flew 167 times over 3 years, teaching British engineers everything they needed to know about jet aviation. And then it was set aside. Its lessons learned too slowly to matter. March 19th, 1945. Berlin, Germany. The sky above the dying Reich is black with smoke. American B-17s and British Lancasters pound what's left of German industry around the clock. In a bunker beneath the rubble, Luftwaffe commanders gather around a map covered in red markers, each one representing a lost airfield, a destroyed factory, a squadron that no longer exists. They have approximately 200 Me-262s operational. Against them, the Allies field over 20,000 aircraft. The mathematics are brutal and final. Oberstleutnant Heinz Bahr, one of Germany's most successful jet pilots, has just landed his Me-262 at München-Riem airfield after his 17th jet victory. His aircraft is pockmarked with bullet holes, not from air combat, but from American P-51s that caught him during takeoff. Because that's the Me-262's Achilles heel, it's vulnerable during the 30 seconds when it's accelerating down the runway. Engines screaming, not yet fast enough to escape. Allied pilots have figured this out. Now they orbit German jet bases at low altitude, waiting. When a Me-262 takes off or lands when it's slow and defenseless, they pounce. It's unglamorous work, shooting jets like sitting ducks, but it's effective. Germany is losing Me-262s faster on the ground than in air combat. Bahr climbs out of his cockpit and surveys the damage. His starboard engine is shot to pieces. The airframe has taken hits that would have downed a piston fighter. But he made it back. The Me-262 is tough. It's fast. It's deadly. It's also too late. By March 1945, Germany has produced approximately 400 Me-262s. Sounds impressive until you realize that Britain alone is producing more than 400 Spitfires per month. America is building fighters at rates that make German production look like a cottage industry, even if every Me-262 was airworthy. Fueled and piloted by an ace, they'd be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. But they're not all airworthy. Roughly half of Germany's Me-262s are grounded at any given time due to engine failures. The Jumo 004 turbines, rushed into production without adequate testing, are burning out after 10, 15 hours of operation. Germany doesn't have enough nickel and chromium to build heat-resistant turbine blades. They're using mild steel instead, which warps and fails. Each engine costs as much as an entire Bf-109 fighter to manufacture and lasts a fraction as long. The fuel situation is worse. Germany's synthetic fuel plants are primary targets for Allied bombers. By March 1945, fuel production has dropped to 20% of 1944 levels. Me-262 pilots are rationed to 1 or 2 sorties per day, sometimes none. Magnificent jets sit on airfields, empty tanks making them useless sculptures. And the pilots themselves are dying. The Luftwaffe's experienced aces, the men who could maximize the Me-262's potential, are being killed faster than they can be replaced. Training programs have collapsed. New pilots get perhaps 20 hours of flight time before being thrown into combat. In conventional fighters, that was deadly. In jets, tricky. Unforgiving jets that require smooth throttle control and careful energy management, it's suicidal. On March 18, 1945, Major Walter Nowotny, commander of the 1st EMI, 262 fighter unit and one of Germany's top aces with 258 kills, is shot down and killed during takeoff. On April 4th, Hans Guido Mutke crashes his Me-262 after an engine failure. On April 24th, Adolf Galland himself is shot down, survives. Barely his knee shattered by cannon fire from a P-51. The jets are revolutionary. But revolutions need time to matter. And Germany has run out of time. April 1945. RAF Manston, England. Wing Commander Andrew McDowell runs his hand along the wing of his Gloucester Meteor F-3. It's raining. It's always raining in England, and the fighter's metallic skin is slick and cold. His squadron, 616 Squadron RAF, has just received orders prepare for deployment to the continent. Finally, after nearly a year of shooting down robot bombs over England, they're going to fight real opponents. Except the war is almost over. The Meteor F-3 is the most advanced version yet. Its Rolls-Royce Derwent engines produce 2,000 pounds of thrust, each more reliable than earlier versions, though still not as powerful as Germany's Jumo 004S. The aircraft can reach 493 miles per hour in level flight fast, though not as fast as the Me-262. It's armed with 4 20mm cannons. It's stable, predictable, and safe to fly. But it has never fought an Me-262. British commanders, it turns out, are terrified of that possibility. What if a Meteor encounters an Me-262 and loses? What if Germany captures a downed Meteor and learns British jet secrets? What if the RAF's jet fighter, Britain's technological pride, proves inferior in combat? So they make a decision that would be laughable if it weren't so tragic. RAF Meteors are forbidden from flying over German-held territory. They can patrol Allied airspace. They can conduct ground attack missions after areas are secured. But they cannot risk air-to-air combat with German jets. The war ends in May 1945 without a single Meteor engaging a single Me-262 in combat. Frank Whittle, exhausted and disillusioned, watches Britain's victory parades from the sidelines. He's been awarded honors, made a companion of the Order of the Bath, promoted to group captain, praised by Churchill himself. But he knows the truth. Britain invented the jet engine and then fumbled the advantage away through bureaucratic timidity and resource misallocation. The numbers tell the story. Germany produced approximately 1,400 Me-262s. Only about 300 saw combat. They shot down roughly 542 Allied aircraft, impressive, but not enough to affect the war's outcome. Britain produced approximately 280 meteors during the war. None fought Me-262S. None escorted bombers over Germany. None changed any major battle's outcome. America produced around 66 P-80 Shooting Stars, their jet fighter, developed from Whittle's designs. The first operational P-80S arrived in Italy in March 1945, weeks before Germany's surrender. They never saw combat. The E.28/39, the aircraft that started everything for the Allies, logged its final flight in July 1944 and was retired. It had proven jets could work. But proving something is possible and exploiting it in time to matter are very different things. Meanwhile, the jets themselves proved something unexpected. The future had arrived. But the present wasn't ready for it. Post-war analysis revealed that Me-262 pilots, despite their advanced aircraft, achieved only marginally better kill ratios than experienced pilots in conventional fighters. The jet's speed made it difficult to aim effectively. Its high fuel consumption limited combat time. Its unreliable engines forced pilots to fly conservatively. And its vulnerability during takeoff and landing meant that tactical advantage could be ambushed away. The Meteor proved similarly limited, fast in level flight but less maneuverable than late-war Spitfires, expensive to operate, maintenance intensive, effective against V-1S basically, flying bombs in straight lines but uncertain against maneuvering targets. Both aircraft were transitional designs, proof that jets could work, but not yet proof that jets were better in all circumstances than mature piston engine fighters. And Frank Whittle's E.28/39. It sits now in the Royal Air Force Museum, preserved behind glass. A small placard explains its significance. First British jet aircraft. First flight May 15, 1941. Proved the viability of jet propulsion. What the placard doesn't say, this aircraft could have changed the war. If only anyone had listened to its creator 10 years earlier. June 1946. Farnborough Air Show, England. The crowd gasps as a Gloucester Meteor screams overhead at 500 miles per hour. Its twin engines leaving trails of heated air that shimmer in the summer sun. Children point. Veterans who flew Spitfires and Hurricanes shake their heads in wonder. This is the future, they're told. The age of propellers is over. Britain, they're assured, leads the world in jet technology. Frank Whittle stands at the edge of the airfield, watching the demonstration with hollow eyes. He's 39 years old and looks 60. The past 15 years have extracted a price. His body is still tallying chronic exhaustion, nervous breakdowns, a failed marriage, and a bitterness that gnaws at him in quiet moments. He's been knighted Sir Frank Whittle now, and celebrated as a national hero. But heroes, he's learned, are created after the fact, when it's safe to acknowledge them. Where were the celebrations in 1930 when he first proposed jet engines? Where was the funding in 1935 when he was begging banks for loans to keep his research alive? Where was the urgency in 1937 when his engine ran successfully and the Air Ministry responded with polite indifference? The answer, of course, is that they were busy. Busy preparing for the last war. Busy perfecting technology they understood. Busy being sensible and cautious and reasonable, all the virtues that lose you the future while you're protecting the present. Post-war investigations have revealed the full scope of what was missed. In 1945, Allied forces captured German jet research facilities and interrogated Messerschmitt engineers. The timeline emerged clearly. Hans von Ohain's first jet engine ran in 1937, the same year as Whittle's. But with better funding and institutional support, the He-178 flew in August 1939, proving the concept while Britain's E.28/39 was still on drawing boards. The Me-262 made its first jet-powered flight in July 1942, but would have flown in 1941 if not for engine development delays. And here's the revelation that haunts Whittle. If Britain had committed to jet development in 1935, when Whittle had a working design, they could have fielded operational jet fighters by 1940. Before the Battle of Britain, before the Blitz, before Germany even began serious jet development. Imagine meteors escorting bombers over Germany in 1943, untouchable by Bf-109 and FWW-190S. Imagine RAF jets intercepting German bombers before they reached London. Imagine the strategic bombing campaign, which cost thousands of Allied lives and aircraft, conducted behind a screen of 600 MP-8 fighters that Luftwaffe pilots couldn't catch. The war might have ended a year earlier. Tens of thousands of lives might have been saved. The entire post-war balance of power might have shifted. But imagination isn't history. History is what happened. Britain invented the jet engine first and then squandered its lead through institutional inertia, funding paralysis, and failure of strategic imagination. December 1947. Washington, D.C. Frank Whittle sits in a Pentagon briefing room, watching American engineers present their latest jet fighter designs. The Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star, the Republic F-84 Thunderjet, the North American F-86 Sabre, a swept-wing beauty that looks like it's moving at 600 miles per hour while sitting on the runway. All of them descended from Whittle's engine. All of them built by a country that recognized the technology's potential and mobilized its industrial base to exploit it. America didn't invent the jet engine, but America is perfecting it, mass-producing it, and building an air force around it. Britain, meanwhile, is broke. The war bankrupted the empire. Rationing continues. Factories that should be building jet fighters are being retooled to build prefabricated housing for bomb victims. The jet program continues. The RAF will soon operate Meteors, Vampires, and eventually swept-wing Hunters, but always a step behind American development, always struggling for funding. Whittle watches the American presentations with professional detachment. They're doing everything right, learning from Britain's mistakes, thinking 10 years ahead instead of 10 years behind. And they're grateful to Whittle, genuinely grateful, in a way his own government never was during the crucial years. But gratitude doesn't erase the bitter arithmetic of lost time. If Britain had funded Whittle in 1930 operational jets, by 1938 before the war started. If Britain had funded Whittle in 1935 operational jets, by 1940 in time for the Battle of Britain. If Britain had funded Whittle in 1937 after his engine successfully ran operational jets, by 1941 in time to escort bombers and dominate German airspace. Instead, Britain funded Whittle seriously in 1940 and got operational jets in 1944 when the war was already decided. 3 years of delay, thousands of lives lost, strategic advantage squandered. All because bureaucrats couldn't imagine a future different from the past they understood. 1953, Cambridge University. Frank Whittle, now retired from the RAF, stands before engineering students lecturing on jet propulsion. His health has partially recovered. His reputation is secure. History has vindicated him. The entire world now flies on engines descended from his designs. Commercial jets are beginning to replace propeller airliners. Military aviation is entirely jet-powered. The age Whittle prophesied in 1930 has arrived. But during the question period, a student asks, "Sir Frank, do you think Britain could have won the war faster if the government had supported your engine earlier?" Whittle pauses. It's a question he's been asked 100 times, and he's learned to answer diplomatically. But today, something breaks through his carefully maintained public persona. The E.28/39 first flew in May 1941, he says quietly. Germany's Me-262 flew in July 1942, 14 months later. But Germany had been funding jet research seriously since 1937. We'd been funding it seriously since 1940. If Britain had matched Germany's commitment in 1937, we would have had operational jets by 1940. The Battle of Britain might have been very different. The entire air war might have been different. He stops, collecting himself. But that's not how institutions work. Organizations don't reward profits. They reward people who deliver incremental improvements to existing systems. True innovation, the kind that makes the old systems obsolete, is threatening. It suggests that the experts were wrong, that their expertise is obsolete, that their careers were built on outdated knowledge. So they resist, not maliciously, just bureaucratically. They form committees, they request more studies, they allocate minimal funding, and then cite the slow progress as evidence that the idea wasn't viable. By the time reality forces their hand, the opportunity has passed. The lecture hall is silent. These students have grown up in the jet age, where Whittle's vindication is complete. But they're hearing, perhaps for the first time, what that vindication cost, 1996. The Royal Air Force Museum, London. The Gloucester E.28/39 sits in a place of honor. Its turquoise paint restored to original luster. A plaque beside it reads, "This aircraft made the first flight by a British jet aircraft on May 15, 1941, proving the viability of Sir Frank Whittle's revolutionary jet engine. It paved the way for modern aviation." Thousands of visitors walk past it each year. School children on field trips, aviation enthusiasts with cameras, veterans who remember when this odd little aircraft represented an impossible dream. What they don't see, because history only records what happened, is the ghost of an alternative timeline where the E.28/39 flew in 1939, not 1941, where production meteors escorted bombers over Germany in 1942, where RAF jets dominated European skies while Germany scrambled to catch up, where Frank Whittle was funded and celebrated in 1935 instead of knighted in 1948, where British technological leadership wasn't surrendered to America through bureaucratic timidity. That timeline existed as a possibility in 1930 when a 23-year-old RAF cadet named Frank Whittle submitted a thesis titled "Future Developments in Aircraft Design." Every year between 1930 and 1940 that the Air Ministry delayed serious support, that timeline became less likely. By 1941, when the E.28/39 finally flew, the window had closed. Germany would field the first operational jet fighter. Britain would follow. Tentatively, America would leap ahead. And Frank Whittle would spend his post-war years wondering what might have been if anyone had listened. The E.28/39 didn't lose the race to the Me-262. It won by 14 months. Britain flew the first Allied jet. British engines powered the first American jets. British engineering pioneered the technology that revolutionized aviation. But in war, being first means nothing if you're not fast enough to matter. and Britain's first jet dismissed, underfunded. Flying years too late to change history stands now as a monument, not to victory, but to the tragedy of vision without support, innovation without urgency, and the future arriving too late to save the present. Frank Whittle died in 1996 at age 89, having lived long enough to see his jet engines carry millions of passengers across oceans, break the sound barrier, and fundamentally transform human civilization. But he never saw the war his invention could have shortened, the lives it might have saved, or the future Britain might have led if only someone had listened when it mattered. The E.28/39 sits in its museum, beautiful and pioneering, and forever too late.